Well, welcome to It's an Inside Job Bite-Sized Fridays, your weekly dose of resilience, optimism, and well-being to get you ready for the weekend. Now, each week, I'll bring you insightful tips and uplifting stories to help you navigate life's challenges and embrace a more positive mindset. And so with that said, let's slip into the stream. Well, welcome back to Bite-Sized Fridays. I'm glad you could join me for the end of the week just before we hit that weekend. Today, we are going to talk about the invisible lines. Now, have you ever found yourself following a rule that no one ever actually said? Or felt that there was a line you couldn't cross, only to later realize it wasn't even there? So in today's episode, we're exploring those invisible lines, the ones that shape our behavior, that can block innovation, that can influence leadership, even when they were never formally agreed upon. Now, these aren't the rules in the handbook. No one's told us this explicitly. They're not the policies reviewed in our onboarding. What I'm talking about are the ones we feel but rarely name. But here's the truth. Some of the most powerful boundaries in any system aren't declared. They are simply assumed. Now, think about the last time you hesitated before asking a tough question in a team meeting, for example, or the moment you felt resistance when suggesting a new way of doing something. Now, if you consider it, where did that resistance really come from? Was it policy? Or was it something more subtle, like a cultural norm no one ever wrote down, but everyone quietly followed? These are the lines between the spoken rules, and often, these invisible lines only come into focus when someone decides to challenge them. We like to think there's a clear line between what's allowed and what isn't, between what we can say and what we shouldn't say. But often, those lines aren't real until someone tests them, until someone asks the question that's been lingering, until someone pushes a little past what's acceptable and watches what happens next. And here's the surprising thing. When we push with purpose, respect, and curiosity, not defiance, we often find those lines aren't lines at all. They're simply assumptions, beliefs, sometimes inherited, sometimes outdated, sometimes just plain wrong. Often they begin with good intentions, maybe to keep harmony or to make decisions easier in a previous context. But like old maps, they don't always reflect today's terrain. And then there's the other kind of line, the ones we draw ourselves. No one ever says them. No one ever enforces them. We create them out of fear, of standing out, of being wrong, of disrupting the flow. But here's the thing. It's often in exploring or even crossing those imagined lines that we discover immense latitude, a freedom and a potential we didn't know existed. We may believe we'll get punished for speaking up, but when we do, the reaction isn't punishment. It's often engagement, sometimes even relief. So let me share a quick story with you. I once worked with a leadership team at a consultancy agency where it was understood that junior team members didn't speak up in client-facing strategy meetings. No one ever said it, but the behavior was modeled in silence. Senior people spoke, others took notes. Then one day, a young analyst raised a thoughtful question about a client's shifting priorities. The room froze. You could actually feel the tension, like the air had thickened. It was that kind of moment where everyone silently wondered, is she allowed to say that? Now, the head of strategy didn't shut her down. He paused, smiled, and said, you know what? That's actually something we've overlooked. Let's dig into that. That one moment shifted the team dynamic. The unspoken rule dissolved, not because someone overruled it, but because someone had the courage to question whether it was real in the first place. Of course, there's a risk. Asking the hard question or floating a new idea might draw some heat. But let's flip that. What's the cost of never asking? What happens when everyone walks around those invisible boundaries, afraid to bump into something? Silence doesn't just block innovation. It also breeds frustration and isolates people. And over time, well, smart individuals stop offering what they think, and eventually they stop caring altogether. That's how teams lose their edge. not through bad decisions, but through quiet disengagement. Now, there's a big difference between operating from belief and operating from experience. Belief is static. Experience is dynamic. Beliefs say, that won't work. Experience says, let's try it and see. Real learning doesn't happen in theory. It happens in friction, in feedback, in respectfully testing what's considered, how can I say this, out of bounds. Assumptions, beliefs, well, they fear friction. But experience, well, it requires it. And let me be clear, not every time and every line is meant to be crossed. Some exist for good reason. It could be for safety, it could be for ethics, it could be for trust. But unless we ask, we won't know which lines protect us and which ones are just legacy habits. Sometimes we need to push. Sometimes we need to shove. Sometimes we need to just gently move things forward, just a little, and to see what actually pushes back. That resistance, that courage, well, it can be revealing. A boundary to respect, or is it a rule to be rewritten? Now, for those of you who've listened to my podcast for a while now, you understand that with my coaching clients, I always assign them homework in between sessions. Now, the magic really happens not so much within our conversations. It happens from the insights from our conversations when they apply it to the real world, where life happens. And that's why I usually have 2 or 3 weeks in between sessions, because it's there, out there, that they can take their insights, their newfound thoughts, and apply them in the real world. And that raw, unfiltered experience, well, that becomes a great feedback loop as to what's really working, what's not, what needs tweaking. And so I want to offer you a challenge this week. So here's your challenge. When in your work or in your team, have you accepted a boundary without ever asking why it's there? What conversation are you avoiding because you assume it's off limits? Instead of assuming, instead of believing the line is fixed, what would it look like to approach it with curiosity? Now, I'm not talking about aggression or arrogance, but genuine inquiry. Try asking, I'm curious, why do we always approach this in, let's say, X way? Is there a reason or a story behind it? I've been thinking about this idea and wonder if it's something we've ever explored or even might consider. I encourage you to ask the question that's been lingering. Voice the idea you've tucked away. Because sometimes what feels like a wall, well, it's just the shadow of one. And pushing through it might be the most constructive thing you do all week. Choose something that is a low-hanging fruit, that is not so consequential. When you push through that wall, that assumed wall, you might actually surprise yourself. The strength of a team or an organization isn't measured by how well it avoids tension. It's measured by how well it engages with the unspoken and learns from it. And that's why, truly, navigating these invisible lines is an inside job. It begins with you, with your assumptions, with your beliefs, your willingness to ask. Your courage to challenge, not recklessly, but respectfully. So ask yourself, what could your team achieve if everyone felt free to respectfully question the unseen barriers? That's the real potential of this inside job. Because the change we want out there, well, as we all know, it often begins with a shift in here. Well, thanks for listening. I hope this has been of some help. And if this episode chimed with you and you know someone in your network who you think it may be of use to, please share it with them. It goes a long way to help me spread the word. Because we all know life is about leading from the inside out. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. And I'll be back next week with my long-form conversational episodes on Monday and the latest bite-sized episode on Friday. And have yourself a relaxing and rejuvenating weekend.